So before we get to the content, I want to emphasize that this session is only for informational purposes. So if you want to make any Databricks purchases decision, just solely rely on the services functionality that is available to you at the time of purchase. So my name is Mojgan Mazouchi. I'm a senior specialist solution architect at Databricks. I've been with Databricks a little bit over 2 years. And with me is Ravi, a lead specialist solution architect who is gonna run a cool demo at the end of the session. So as part of this session, I'm gonna give you an overview of Delta Live tables and the most commonly used features that we've seen customers are using Delta Live tables for. If you have attended a breakout session by Michael Armburst yesterday, you may find some of the topics familiar to you on the overview side. And then we will do a deep dive on the DLT meta approach and the metaprogramming approach in Delta Live tables and how you can actually dynamically scale up your ETL pipeline. So towards the end of the session, we will have Ravi showing a very cool demo on how you can build the metaprogramming approach using the DLT meta within the Delta Live tables. So a quick overview on Delta Live tables. So Delta Live tables is the best way to do ETL on the Lakehouse. It enables you to accelerate your ETL development, and that is basically enabling you to providing you with a separation of environments when you can test in an environment separate from your production. You can test before deploying. You can deploy and managing your pipelines using unit testing, parameterization, documentation. And as a result, you can basically simplify the ETL cycle using the Delta Live tables. It also unifies the batch and streaming workloads. So unlike many other products that forces you to separate out your workloads by the batch or streaming workloads, Delta Live tables support any type of data workloads that you have, and with a single API, you can do both batch and streaming in the Delta Live tables framework. It is also automatically enables you to automatically manage your infrastructure. So we all know sizing the clusters when you have like a performance or tight SLAs that you need to meet can become very challenging, especially if you have like a unpredictable volume of data sets and you have like a tight SLA. So you might actually over provisioning if you want to meet that SLA. Or if you have like an unpredictable higher volume of data at one day, you may actually face that you're under provisioning your resources. So with Delta Live tables, this is basically, Delta Live tables provide you with an option that you can set the minimum and maximum of your instance numbers. So basically based on that, Delta Live tables can decide based on the cluster utilization at the time of processing whether it's a good time to scale up in the compute or scaling down the compute. So with that, it avoids you to over provisioning or under provisioning all the time. And last but not least, it would ensure the high quality in your pipeline. So using the Delta Live table, it makes it much easier for you to create trusted data sources for your pipeline, leveraging from the supported features for the data quality management and monitoring that it provides. So the feature is called expectations in the Delta Live tables framework. And using the expectations, you can prevent the bad data from flowing into your tables, and you can also aggregate all the data quality metrics across your pipeline. Over time, you can get to see the high fidelity diagram of your pipeline, and it enables you to see the tracking the dependencies in your pipeline and seeing all the, monitoring all the tables that are flowing the data from left to right. So there are other key features. So with Delta Live tables, you can use both Python APIs as well as SQL APIs. And if you want to actually interchangeably using like a Python and SQL, you can you have the freedom of choice, like using it from one notebook to another. Delta Live tables actually comes with a managed runtime. which improves over time, meaning that as a user, you don't need to be worried about like which runtime you should select. You don't need to be worried about what is the right time to upgrade, whether you should upgrade the runtime or not. It is basically, is smart enough, even if there's a regression on the new runtime, it is smart enough to revert back to the previous working runtime. So with Delta Live tables, you may actually heard about Unity Catalog, and you may wonder how's the integration working. So Delta Live tables integrates very well with Unity Catalog, meaning that any table that you are publishing into your pipeline, you can actually see that in the Unity Catalog, as well as you can also see the lineage of your data in Unity Catalog. It also integrates very well with the autoloader, which is the source for streaming. So in case that you are incrementally ingesting your data, as the data arrives into your storage location, you can, using the autoloader, ingest the data and then process it using Delta Live tables. So Delta Live tables is the streaming first architecture using the automatic management infrastructure feature that it provides, as well as accelerating the ETL development process. All of this results in you to reducing the cost for your workload, as well as improving the performance of your workloads. And my favorite feature that Delta Live tables offer is that it comes with the next generation of auto-scaling, so meaning that you are not only have the legacy auto-scaling, but also you have what it's called the enhanced auto-scaling, and it's great for the streaming workloads. So Delta Live tables provide excellent support for the processing of change data capture, as you get like a streaming of insert, update, or delete records for your original table, you can specify which rows can be inserted, which rows can be updated based on the set of primary keys that you have. You can also specify which rows you can get deleted based on the certain conditions that are meant for deletion of those records. It's great in a way that it has like a declarative API called apply changes into. And one thing that is about like apply changes into that makes it very unique is that it can handle the ordering implicitly, meaning that as a user, you don't need to be worried about like if the events are coming out of order and how to handle those orders. It's basically the DLT apply changes into API will make sure that the results of the tables are basically in a way that as if your events were coming in the correct order. It currently supports both SCD type 1 as well as SCD type 2. And it's also, because of the great integration with autoloader, the features that are supported with autoloader are also supported with DLT, so you can get the schema evolution as well. So you may wonder, now we know about all these key features. These are like all great features. Now, how can I scale up the development in case that I don't have tens tables, but I have like hundreds of tables that I want to produce in my pipeline? So you can build the metadata-driven using the DLT framework. If you attended Michael Armbrust's session actually on Wednesday, he briefly talked about a simple case when you can use the for loop and fan out tables out of it using the metaprogramming approach. So here we're gonna actually go through a more general way and framework that you can use the DLT meta and apply it into your DLT development cycle. So for this framework, you need to have the metadata interface, and what it does is basically it would capture the input and output metadata. Then it would also capture let's say you have like a data quality rules that you want to enforce in your table. So you can actually, having that metadata for your data quality rules, and also capturing the transformation logic as SQL. So, you have like an enrichment layer as a silver layer. You want to actually do like some refinement. So all those refinements and transformation logic that you have in place, like you want to make some, column type changes, or like you want to map some column names and all. So you can actually capture those metadata. And once you have all this metadata information, then what you need is the generic DLT pipeline to understand those metadata information. And then it can apply the appropriate readers based on the input metadata. And it can also apply the data quality rules that you have in place with using the DLT expectations. Once you have all of this, then we can actually build a DLT pipeline, and knowing the flow from like a left to right, how the data should flow in your pipeline, and also run and launch the DLT pipeline. So here's the solution overview, and Ravi will actually walk you through the demo and will show how it looks like. But this is a very quick overview. So basically, what we need is the input files. And for the input files, there are 3 major input files that we're going to use. One is the onboarding JSON file. The second one is the data quality rules JSON. And the third is the silver transformation JSON logic, which is basically that enrichment layer that we want. And once we have the input files, all these 3 files will be consumed by the DLT meta API, which is basically, we call that API the onboard data flow specs. And that API is meant to translate the metadata information that we give as an input to it into a delta table, which we call it as a data flow specs. And the reason we call it as a data flow spec is that basically it would capture the specification of the data as it flows from left to right in your pipeline. So once we have that delta table, we will use the DLT, the generic DLT pipeline, to generate the bronze layer as well as the silver layer in our pipeline. So some of you might actually have, okay, for our business, we need to also have like a more aggregation on top of it. We need like a customized aggregation to build on top of it. So that would be in the gold layer. And you always can have like a gold as a separate transformation logic and kind of like orchestrated with workflows. And Ravi will also show you how you can orchestrate multiple tasks with Delta Live tables once you create that Delta Live tables logic using DLT meta. So in general, DLT meta has 3 major stages. One is the onboarding job, where basically you get like a metadata information, and then it would get translated into the data flow spec delta table. And that data flow spec delta table would feed into the generic DLT pipeline to create and launch your DLT pipeline. And for that gold layer, or like other tasks that are having like a dependencies to your DLT pipeline, you can always call them as a separate task in the workflows and orchestrate all these tasks together. So with this in mind, I'm gonna hand it over to my colleague Ravi so he can actually show you a cool demo on how it works.
Thanks, Morgan. Hi, everyone. My name is Ravi Gawai. I'm a lead specialist solution architect at Databricks. I've been working with Databricks over 6 years, helping customers to productionize their workloads. And while doing that particular journey, I've always taken this metadata approach. So let's begin. So let me give you a demo summary, like what you're going to do in today's demo. So we have picked up this demo use case, which is basically an extension of the talk that our colleagues have given on Tuesday. That is, you can have an RDS instance, and then you can replicate the CDC events using AWS DMS replication service. Let me show you. I think the diagram will give you a better justification. So this is what the use case is, like typical use case wherein you're sending the CDC updates, right? And then it can be your S3 bucket or like object storage. And from there onwards, Delta Live tables will handle those CDC updates, all right? So in this demo, what we're going to do is we're going to go over all the onboarding files that Morgan talked about. We'll go over the structures like how we are capturing the input-output metadata, right? Then we'll run the onboarding API so that those configuration files get translated into data flow spec as a metadata. Then we will run our bronze and silver layer so that it can take those metadata and generate the bronze and silver layer. So we will start with customer and transaction feeds. So you might have seen that diagram, there are like 4 feeds. For the demo purpose, I have just like divided into 2 parts. One is we'll start with customer and transactions. We'll run the bronze and silver pipeline. Once that's up and running, then I'm going to add 2 more feeds, that is products and stores. And then we're going to rerun this entire process, that is run the onboarding, launch the DLT pipeline. So you might have seen the last slide, there are like 3 stages. So we're going to follow those stages, like stage 1, onboarding, stage 2, create the DLT pipeline, and stage 3 is kind of an optional for workflow. Maybe you have a dependency, like bronze should be run before silver, and then you might have a gold, something like that. So I'll show you that. Then we will simulate the initial load, that is day 0 scenario, wherein you might get the initial snapshot, and then the incremental runs, we're going to simulate that. Okay, so let's get started. So let's first talk about what this onboarding file looks like. So this onboarding file is nothing but a simple JSON configuration, wherein we are just capturing input-output metadata. So the first thing is like you should able to identify your workflows. That's the reason like the flow ID is nothing but uniquely identifying your workload. Then there is a group concept. So in Michael's talk, you might have seen that you can run the small tables in kind of a single DLT to get a better TCO. Of course, it depends like on your SLAs and all, but in this today's demo, I'm clubbing together customer and transaction under one DLT. So I'll be using this group concept. So even though like you have multiple configuration for those customer and transaction, they can be launched under single DLT. So as a part of the configuration, then you need to capture, okay, where those CDC update feeds are coming on my S3. So I'll capture those paths over here. Then you might have a custom schema coming up. So you might be getting the DDL file. So you'll just specify, okay, these are my DDL file. So your generic code or the onboarding code will take that DDL file and convert into Spark schema so that whenever you do kind of like spark.read, it will apply your schema. For this demo purpose, I'm using autoloader. So the source format, you can see it's like cloud files, right? So once you have this input information, then you want to tell that, okay, what is my bronze database name? So you might have seen this underscore prod. Like typically we use this as an environment variable. So the idea is you can have a single file or multiple file with a prefix or suffix as an environment, so that when you do the CI/CD, you can just specify the environment variable, and it will just pick up those values for that specific environment and deploy it. So that's that underscore environment variable. Then the next up is like, okay, bronze table, any reader options. Right now we are using autoloader, so I'm using the autoloader options because I'm getting those CDC update as the CSV files. Then once you gather that, the next thing is the data quality expectations. So we gather those data quality expectations into separate JSON so that sometimes they get automatically generated also. A lot of customers, they generate this onboarding file, silver transformation file, and data quality automatically because of the metadata they are having. There is a quarantine feature also. So by default, DLT doesn't come up with the quarantine feature, but the APIs DLT have are very enriched so that you can simulate that quarantine feature. So you can quarantine the data in a sense like when the data is coming from the external feed, you don't trust, like sometimes bad data comes in and you want to quarantine into different table so that you can send that data back to the source system and they can correct it and send it back. So that's the idea of quarantine. So once you have that, then the silver table comes in. So you might be wondering that in a single spec or single tag, I'm clubbing bronze and silver. The idea is like bronze and silver in this medallion architecture, it's like one-to-one. Like you have append only bronze layer and then you have an enriched silver layer in which you might do type 1, type 2 kind of a merges, right? So that's the reason I clubbed it together, because for silver, bronze becomes your source. So it's okay to have this entire configuration as one unit. Make sense? And then for this example purpose, we will be doing the type 2 merges in the silver layer. With this particular DLT meta framework, you can do the merges in bronze also. So as you can see in this particular example, like I have mapped this entire signature of Delta Live Table supply changes as is. So we will be merging this customer on the silver based on these merge keys. sequence by DMS timestamp because I'm getting those timestamps as a part of the CDC events, doing the type 2 update. So that's about it. And then the last thing is the silver transformation JSON. So let me show you how that silver transformation JSON looks like. So it's basically nothing but select expression in terms of typically in silver layer you have enrichment changes. Maybe you want to change the column name. Maybe you want to enrich the data. In this particular example, I have just concatenated first name and last name and created a new business column. So you might have your own logics. Like that's how silver layers are typically. Apart from that, you can also add a filter condition so that imagine you have a customer feed coming up and you want to fan out into different table based on maybe country. So you can add that filter condition and you can fan out to different bronze table. So that's the structure of our onboarding file. So this particular DLT meta is a solution that we have built and we have published it into Databricks labs. So it has taken this metaprogramming approach and implemented those design principles because we wanted to help as many as customer at the same time without writing a single line of code so that they can bring their configuration and call the API. They don't even need to write the DLT code. That's the idea. So it's a PyPy release. So all I have to do is I have to just say pip install DLT meta. So there are different ways. Since it's a PyPy package, you can install it on your cluster and run it interactively. So I just installed that package. And now first step of stage 1 is basically creating this customer and transaction feed. So for the demo purpose, I have already created this, given all the details about customer and transactions. So I'm going to just create this file quickly. Oh, I haven't run this thing. OK. This demo notebook is pretty configurable so that you can also take it and then run it, like give whatever configurations and parameter wherever you want to run it. So in the later, I'll show you the Git repo for this. So I just want to make sure, OK, we have written the file, looks good. So now here is the part. We installed that pip install DLT meta. Now we're going to call those APIs and pass on the onboarding file details. All you have to do is pass on the onboarding file name and the database in which you want to create your bronze data flow spec and the silver data flow spec, which is nothing but your metadata as a delta table. So I'm going to quickly run this. So what it will do is it will take that onboarding file, whatever references it had, and it will translate into bronze and silver metadata delta tables. So see here, we had like customer transaction. It created 2 metadata entries for your bronze and your silver. And in a production environment, you can create this as a Databricks job also. Since it's a Python package, what you can do is you can create this as a job. You can say this is job type is a Python wheel type. You can give a package name. Since this is a Python package, you can just add the dependencies as like PyPy DLT meta because it's available. And then basically in the configuration section, you can provide all the same parameters like where is my onboarding file, what should be my database, and what should be the table names for the metadata. So let's move on, quickly check that our metadata is loaded into those delta tables. So looks like it got translated from those JSON files to the delta table for bronze. It also translated the silver. So if you see that, like you might have seen that JSON was like too overwhelming, but like if you see the table here, you will see those things get translated nicely, like, okay, what are the source details, what are the reader options, and so on. So for bronze and silver, we have maintained those like different tables. So let's move to the stage 2 now. So the stage 2 is basically now we want to create DLT pipeline. So for this demo purpose, I have already created it. What I will be doing is I will be showing you how to create that particular DLT pipeline with the options. So here, all you have to do is just give any name, then provide like select the product edition. You can select trigger mode or continuous. For the demo purpose, I have selected the trigger mode. You can use it in continuous also. Then you need to provide the generic notebook which can understand this particular metadata. So I'll show you quickly after running through these options what that notebook looks like. Then you basically specify what is your target schema in which you want to store those customer and transactions. Select the cluster policy sizing in terms of how big is your workload. For this demo, I've just selected one workload because we're just running 2 tables. And then here is the section in which you are passing these configuration parameters, which will be understood by our generic DLT pipeline, which is like, what is my layer? Layer is bronze. What is the group? So that I have passed this group A1. If you remember that we had for A1, then it will bring that customer and transaction both the tables and try to run it in the single DLT. And it will get that configuration from this particular table. So this is your bronze DLT pipeline. And then the next step is you will have to create the silver pipeline. So it's basically same, bronze and silver. The only difference is in terms of parameters, right? So here the parameter, the layers are changing from bronze to silver. You can have the group and what is the metadata table it should get that information from, right? So now let's take a look at what the generic notebook looks like. So that generic notebook is nothing but you are installing this particular package wherein you have all the code which understand this metadata and run the DLT pipeline. We are simply passing those configuration to that particular API, that's it. So for both bronze and silver, it's the same notebook. So that completes our stage 2. Let me also show you the workflow. So what you do as a part of the workflow is you go to the workflows and create workflow something like this. Since we created this bronze and silver delta live tables pipelines, you will just create a task saying that, okay, this is my task name, this is of type delta live tables, and then I'll select the pipeline that I had created previously, and that's it. And then I will add the silver task, and I'll say it depends on bronze. So that way I created a workflow, and you don't have to launch these bronze and silver independently. You can just launch the workflow. So that's stage 3, right? So just to summarize, we understood how the onboarding interface is in terms of how we are capturing the information, in terms of onboarding file, silver transformation, and data quality expectation. Then all we did is just populated those JSON information into metadata table, and that's it. So the next, and then we created bronze and silver pipelines. So now let's do the run. So before that, I just want to clean out everything. I want to make sure that it's a day 0 scenario so that only initial load files are present there. So I'm just making sure that customer and transaction, whatever the source path we have specified, it just have the initial load files, if you see here, right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the bronze pipeline so that it will take that configuration which we have provided here, like what is the layer and what's the group. Based on that, it's going to go to that particular table, fetch that metadata information, and dynamically get those customer and transaction information and set up those tables as a bronze table. So as you can see here, it is setting up the tables, voila. So with the generic code base, we were able to write it to the bronze table, customer and transaction. So you might have seen like, okay, we have this source, but there are 2 tables. If you remember, we had a quarantine requirement, right? So it is also creating the quarantine table, but right now in the initial load, data quality expectation is not failing. That's the reason it's like 0. So for both the table, you will see main table, bronze table, and the quarantine table. Similarly, I will launch the silver pipeline. So in silver pipeline, if you remember, we are doing type 2 merges. Since this is like a day 0 scenario, it will try to do the merge, but like it will just do append because nothing will be matching. So with that, let's quickly check, because since these are like delta table, I can just go and say describe history and check like, okay, how my bronze table looks like. So the initial is like DLT setup, and it's a streaming update. So bronze is like append only. You can see it's append. We can check if the data is inserted into customer table. So looks like there are 200 rows got inserted. Same with transaction. Looks good. So both bronze tables got populated. So now everything is running, like your bronze pipeline, silver pipeline with customer and transaction. Now the typical scenario is like everything working fine, and now you want to add new feeds. So what you do? All you have to do is now modify the metadata file here, just like that. I'm going to add product and store now to the existing pipeline. I'm not launching any new pipeline. I'm just creating the configuration, and I'm going to call the onboarding API again. So this is that onboarding file which has product and stores. We will run the onboarding API again, so that now our metadata table will be populated with 2 additional entries for product and stores. So as you can see, now we have like 4 rows here for bronze and 4 rows for silver. Since for product and store, this is also initial run, right? The day 0 scenario. So again, we'll just make sure for product and store, those initial load files are present. Looks good. And this time, instead of running bronze and silver independently, I'm going to just launch the Databricks workflow, so that bronze and silver will be run together. So as you can see, it started our bronze pipeline. So in a previous run, we just had customer and transactions. Now using the same DLT, I have not deployed any new DLT or new pipeline, anything. I just populated the configuration, and it should able to get product and stores also. Setting up the tables, voila. So you can see the same pipeline ran with stores. So you can see 4 entries got inserted into store, and then the transaction, we haven't provided a new feed. So transaction, it didn't do anything because it didn't get any new file information. So let's go back. Let's quickly check the silver run, because we just checked the bronze run. So I'm going to quickly go back. So it's triggered the silver run. It should do the same thing for silver. So silver also, we should see the 4 tables appearing. See here, earlier, in the earlier run, we just had 2, right? But now in the current run, it got the new configuration, so it dynamically created those 2 tables in the same DLT workflow with just metadata change. So let's quickly check our product table that we recently added into our existing pipeline. That also looks good, append only. Let's check if the data is inserted. Yes, looks good, 20 rows. Quickly check the delta table for stores. That also looks good. I'm going to just check if the store entries are inserted. Okay, good. So now let's check the silver table. I mean, we checked the bronze one. For silver, if I do the describe history, you will notice, since we use SCD type 2, you will see in delta history, it's a merge kind of a thing, right? So for silver, we had this first name, last name kind of a thing. See that those enrichment changes are there. So our bronze and silver pipeline looks pretty good. So now I will quickly check if the transaction is there for silver. Okay, cool. So now that ends the initial snapshot running. So now we will do incremental runs, right? So for incremental runs, what I have done is I tried to simulate this situation by putting the incremental files somewhere, and I'm going to just like push those incremental files for products and all those things into the respective source directory, right? So this way around, now our bronze pipeline will get those incremental CDC files. And what I will do is now again I will launch our workflow, so that now it will run in an incremental mode. So in real scenario, you might run in continuous mode, right? So that you don't have to trigger it, or maybe based on your use case, you can like trigger it hourly or daily, whatever your use case is. So that's pretty much it. So if this was like too much overwhelming in terms of a lot of things have happened. So if you want to see this demo in action, we are publishing this particular demo on Databricks GitHub. You can go to the Databricks Delta Live Tables notebooks. There is this DLT meta demo. All you have to do is just follow these steps. We have 5 minutes, I can do it for you. So all it needs is follow these instructions. So I'm going to copy paste to save time, just git clone. So it will clone this particular demo on your laptop. Then you have to go to this. I think the connection looks slow. OK, it's not bad. Then it only needs 2 things. One is the Databricks host, and another is the Databricks token. So what is Databricks host is your workspace URL. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the Databricks host URL from here. This is my Databricks host URL. I'm going to just set it. And I need a Databricks token. So I'll show you how the token is also created. All you have to do is go here, user settings, access token, generate cool demo. I'm going to say 1. You can see my token, but trust me, I'm going to delete it after launching it. So all you have to do is now just launch this Python script. It will do this entire demo. It will launch this entire demo on your workspace with just single command. So what it basically taking is, if you're running the Databricks on AWS or Azure or GCP, you just provide those options, which DBR version you want and where you want this demo to be pushed. So what it will do is, whatever information I showed you, it's going to take all the initial files, configurations, and everything, going to push into your workspace and launch this entire demo from onboarding till the incremental runs. So let's see if this demo is launched. Just pushing the files. Done. I'm going to go to workflows. Yeah, so it launched the job. So I just need to go to this jobs and see it has launched this. So this entire stuff, if you see, whatever we have done, it's automatically launched. You can try it out. So with that, I conclude the demo. Thank you. So in case you have not followed few of the steps, I just want to summarize quickly that you can use the metaprogramming to productionize it. You can use this framework, which is under Databricks Labs, or you can build your own following those principles. Why you should use this metaprogramming framework? Because it's configuration driven. It reduces your development cycle. You have seen we added like product and stores in no time. It is in production with many Databricks customers right now, this DLT meta. As of now, we support autoloader, Delta, Event Hub, and Kafka as an input source. And these are the, if you want to, these are the Git repos. You can just look them up. This is for DLT meta, and the demo is here. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. I mean, I really appreciate you showing up 3:30 on the last day. That shows like you are the guys who want to really productionize your workload. Thank you.